What is innovation? Innovation is about seeing what is possible, not limiting our thinking by accepting that what we have right now or where we are today is all there is for us in this life's journey. Innovation is about reaching our true potential as individuals, companies, and as communities. In order to reach our true potential, we have to challenge ourselves and make ourselves uncomfortable at times. I would like to share with you my personal innovation story. At the age of 21 and graduating from college, I had decided to leave my family and friends and go to America with little money and no contacts. Coming out of college, I didn't have any options that appealed to me in Ireland. There would be options, but they were limited and low paying. I needed to provide for my parents. I knew I wouldn't earn enough money to do that if I stayed in Ireland. America had lots of potential, but was much riskier. I had no contacts and little money, but I had potential and a blank sheet of paper to write my own story. After lots of tears at the airport, I embarked on my uncertain adventure. Leaving your family is hard. Stepping out of your comfort zone is scary. So why did I do it? To create a better life for myself and to better support those I was daring to leave. I did it to achieve what I believed was possible and create a better future. Change and innovation can be exciting, but at the same time, the unknown is uncomfortable and can be scary. Anytime we challenge ourselves to a new way of thinking or push ourselves to do something new and different, we are putting ourselves out there. There is always the possibility of failure. Before I left Ireland, my friends gave me gifts, and one gift made a big impact on me, a pair of cufflinks. Back then, I did not wear suits every day, so I had no use for cufflinks. And more importantly, those cufflinks were from someone who didn't have much money. Cufflinks were worn by successful business people in nice suits with French cuffs. These cufflinks represented who I wanted to be, not who I was. They represented my future, my potential. They said to me, "I believe in you." Those 4 simple words stuck with me, and even today, whenever I feel discouraged or I'm going through a tough time, I remember those cufflinks and those 4 simple words, "I believe in you." Supporting and believing in innovation can lead to potential being unleashed and to achieve something great and to make a difference in our communities. I challenge us all to think about what is possible and reach for our true potential as individuals, companies, and communities.
We started in hard times to bring us all into the laughter.
Welcome to Public Power Underground, Public Power's premier infotainment program that covers public power and public power adjacent news from a power department's perspective. I'm this week's celebrity guest host, Robert Trinnear. I am an energy authority and TA's Vice President of Strategic Innovations and Chief Innovation Officer.
And I'm Abigail Sawyer, an Associate Editor of California Energy Markets, reporting on the Southwest region for News Data and News Data's podcast ambassador for this week.
And this is Brian Fawcett, the Economic Development Manager for Clatskanie IPUD and the voice of the Underground.
And I'm the Creative Director of Public Power Underground, manager of Clatskanie IPUD's Power Department, and producer for today's recording, Paul Dockery. Welcome, team. Welcome. New cast. This is fun.
I'm inspired by that opening monologue. That was great.
Yeah,
yes. Thank you for sharing your innovation story, Robert.
Yeah, very, thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
No, we believe in you too. You know, we got a believe mug right here. We're believers. Also, I think that's the first time that anyone has pronounced premiere the right way. We're gonna have to just snippet that and just remember how to pronounce it for all future episodes.
Get that on the soundboard and just insert it right in there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's lots of other words that I pronounce differently. Like I pronounce aluminium and I pronounce garage, and
nice.
The trunk of a car is called a boot. So there's some other snippets for you.
Yes, I love it. We'll save all those snippets. I have an innovation story to share as well. We have Public Power Underground merch. So if you want to be the voice of the underground like Brian, you can actually get a t-shirt that says voice of the underground. I mean, that's pretty innovative, right, Robert? It's some merch. for
I
public
feel like
power.
this needs to be up on the screen right now. Is that something that people can get a little snippet?
Am I capable of that? Probably. Do we have time for that? Probably not. Maybe we'll put it, but you could
In the
go.
show
I'll put the
notes.
link in the show notes. There we go.
Yep.
We
Link
should
in
all
the
be
show
wearing that merch, actually. Those t-shirts.
I'm wearing a hat that's the merch. That'll be on there.
Yeah, it needs higher contrast. Sorry.
Yeah, well,
Zoom in.
it's subtle. We go
Yeah,
for subtle.
okay.
Yeah,
Subtlety's
geeky
nice.
Subtle. Yeah.
All right.
That's right.
Yeah, I definitely think this Public Power Underground podcast is innovation at work. So good on you for putting this together.
Yes.
Right.
The Energy Authority has just put a stamp of approval on the underground as being innovative. That's right. I knew it was
Excellent.
great to invite you. Okay, I think we're ready to go. We ready to go, team?
Think so.
We're ready.
Okay, let's do it.
This is season 4, episode 11. On today's recording, we discuss all sorts of energy news, including the IPCC's Working Group 3 report, the nationalization of national grid, a 4.7 million fine by FERC, electrifying heavy-duty trucks, public power white papers, Arin reports with Brian reporting, and a bunch of witty banter in between. Before we get started, Paul is going to read a quick word from our presenting sponsor.
Who's our presenting sponsor, Robert? Who is it?
It's the Energy Authority.
Yes, it is. It's the Energy Authority. The presenting sponsor of Public Power Underground is the Energy Authority. The Energy Authority is a nonprofit energy portfolio management company owned by public power entities like us, just like Brian and I's Klatskin IPUD. It's a public power entity. TEA's mission is to help clients maximize the value of their assets and meet their power supply goals. TEA does this by providing expertise in energy trading, advanced analytics, renewable solutions, strategic innovation, and a whole lot more. Over 60 public power utilities have partnered with TA to tackle their energy future. So if you're looking for an energy authority like Robert to partner with in navigating the uncertain future of our industry, visit TEAinc.org. That's TEAinc.org. The Energy Authority, there is underground as it gets. It's a great name. It's a great name of an organization, Robert. Do you want to add anything to the promo coming from there, representing TEA on this podcast?
I think you did it justice. So thank you.
Well, I want to say it's a great acronym as well. You know.
It is.
It's
Authority. It's
easy
like
to remember.
the Ohio State University. It's like, wait, okay.
Ooh, I don't know about comparing to Ohio State though. That's
I think,
let's not go down that road.
It's not wrong.
All right, thanks, Paul. We're starting this week, like most weeks, checking in on power market indicators in the Northwest with our first segment, Arin Reports with Brian reporting.
That's right. This is my first time doing Arin Reports. I talked to Arin earlier for some advice, of which she gave me none. So if she's listening right now, I hope she takes that and does a little better next time. Anyways, this is Arin Reports with Brian reporting, where we try to get up to speed on Northwest power market indicators for April 12th, 2022. I'm Brian Fawcett, and I've got your market update for the week. Spot market power in the Northwest for delivery today is at 79.13, with natural gas at 627 per MMBTU, translating to a spark spread of 35.25 and a heat rate of 12,600. Spot power in Southern California at 43.38 and Northern California 74.56. Balance of month for Mid-C heavy load is at 65, up 15 from a week ago. May power at Mid-C is up 750 from a week ago to 44.95, and Sumas gas is at 558, translating to a heat rate of 8,000 BTU per kilowatt hour. May power at Palo Verde is up 795 from a week ago to 58.50 per megawatt hour. August power at Mid-C is trading up $12 per megawatt hour from a week ago at 174.85, with Sumas gas at 670, translating to a heat rate of 26,000 BTU per kilowatt hour. At Palo Verde, August power is at 253.45 per megawatt hour, up 1085 from a week ago. Spring salmon have begun making their way upriver. 52 adult spring Chinook were counted at Bonneville yesterday, April 11th, bringing the year-to-date total to 1,253. October through September flows at the Dalles for water year 2022 are currently forecasted to be 96% of normal, and April to September is at 97%. Outflow at the Dalles peaked over the past week at 194.1 kcfs on April 7th. Day ending elevation at Grand Coulee yesterday was 1,252, and peak outflow this past week was 182.5 kcfs on April 10th. Checking in on Answergy's aggregated basin data on snow in the region, the aggregation of all the snow in the Columbia River Basin that'll flow through Bonneville Dam is estimated to be 86% of normal. Spending a beat at Bonneville's Balancing Authority, peak load this past week was about 8,297 on April 6th at 7:15 a.m. During load's peak, hydro generation was at 11,200, wind gen was 145, and conventional units were 1,134, and nuclear 1,154, all units in megawatts. Because we're all curious, load during the snowstorm yesterday on April 11th peaked at 8,031 megawatts. ENSO for January, February, March period sits at -0.9 Oceanic Nino Index. The multivariate ENSO index for February through March is at -1.30, and the SST Consolidated Nino forecast indicates that La Nina conditions are likely to continue through spring 2022. This week in NOAA climate forecast, the 6 to 10 day outlook has temp below normal and precipitation above normal for the region. The 30-day outlook issued March 31st shows a leaning for below normal temperatures and above normal precipitation halfway through the month, and I'd say that wasn't a bad leaning. Special thanks to Answergy for letting us use their dashboards, and thanks to Luigi for compiling this week's report. That's all we've got for this update.
Thank you for the report, Brian.
Any takeaway on fish, Brian? You're the fisher. Fisher.
I
There's
have
a term for that. There's a fisher. There's a
angler. Angler. Yeah. That's a much better term. I haven't been out fishing much, but I missed out on a few trips, and folks were catching fish, so I was a little jealous. But I've been doing other things that have been keeping me busy. So I will be heading out here at some point to take advantage of those increasing fish runs. But the lower Columbia is now closed, so it's going to be a little travel above the dam.
My 8-year-old, I think he's still 8. He is still 8. He turns 9 in May. He got his first it's like the open reel type instead of the kids reel that with the button on it.
Yeah.
It's got what do you call it? It's the thing you flip back. Tell you what, we had some meltdowns as he was trying to cast that thing for the
spinning reel. Yeah.
Spinning reel. Yes. So he wants to come fishing at some point, but now I get to tell him that the Columbia River is closed. So
there's lots of opportunity. Yeah, we'll figure it out. You're close to some good spots over there too.
Yeah, it is. It's a nice place. The Northwest is a great place to fish. Anything else that caught your attention, Abigail or Robert, on market conditions or anything you want to talk some more about?
Well, I heard that lower temperatures and higher precipitation are expected, and that does seem like something we're hoping for in the short term, at least this year, trying to catch up. So.
Yeah, we're recording on a Tuesday. We usually record on a Monday because I couldn't get to the office because of an April 11th snowstorm, which is pretty weird, actually.
I can't remember April snow in my life. I'm sure there has been, but I can't actually remember it. And I've lived in Oregon my whole life, so really interesting.
But to take it when you can get it, right? I mean, that's what we've come to. Snow on the 4th of July. Why not?
Why not?
So.
Yeah. I just the gas prices continue to accelerate, so that's certainly something that is very newsworthy at the moment.
Definitely.
Is that still driven by like the European energy crisis? Is this a continuation of the export of LNG to Europe that's driving the whole country's natural gas prices up, or is it weather? Is this more recent spike weather related? Any insight there?
Yeah, I think certainly underpinning this all, is that the European crisis. Germany imports about 40% of its natural gas from Russia, and so with the situation with Ukraine, there's certainly a lot of LNG is flowing over to Europe right now, and but what we're also seeing is that I think certainly my expectation is that there'd be more drilling in response. Especially in the Permian Basin in West Texas, and getting associated gas from there. But I think what's happening is there's much more producer discipline. There's much more capital discipline. So it's not, the response to these higher prices isn't as elastic as one would have expected. And I think if you keep on telling people don't drill, don't drill, get away from drilling fossil fuels, and do something else, you can understand the apprehension of drilling more, even though the price signals are maybe there.
Yeah, we actually had, I think the episode was called The Gas Giants, and we had some TEA experts on, energy authorities, to talk about exactly that, the capital discipline going on in the natural gas markets. I had to go look it up and prep for this. It was back in October of 2021. So this has been, we think of it, a lot of this is tied to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but this has been going on since October of last year, where we've had this pressure in UK and Europe on natural gas prices.
Yeah, like the prices over there are just crazy high. And so just certainly there's an impact from that. Yep.
Okay. Thanks for bringing it back around to some power topics, away from stories about casting with my 8-year-old. I think we're ready. Everybody ready? We can go.
Next up is our weekly walkthrough, public power and public power adjacent news, in a segment we like to call Public Power Desktop. Paul, give us the typewriter. Take it away, Abigail.
All right. First up, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change published its Working Group 3 report on April 4th. Working Group 3 focuses on climate change mitigation, assessing methods for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. The conclusion was succinctly put by Damian Carrington at The Guardian in his story published April 4th. A century of rising emissions must end before 2025 to keep global heating under 1.5 degrees Celsius, beyond which severe impacts will increase further, hurting billions of people. Billions. The IPCC spells out the huge cost reductions over the last decade in solar and wind power, and says that some countries already have electricity grids predominantly powered by renewables. It also strongly highlights the big potential impact from energy efficient homes, walking and cycling, greener diets, and less food waste. The most controversial part of the IPCC report is about technologies to bury fossil fuel emissions and suck CO2 from the air. The scientists are, at best, cautious about carbon capture and storage, which could extend the use of coal and gas in power stations, but they are clear it is unavoidable that some CO2 is going to have to be removed from the atmosphere to balance emissions from energy-intensive industries and aviation, which are hard to decarbonize. That would be growing trees, burning plants, and trapping the emissions, or even turning CO2 into rock. When solicited for energy feedback, Energy Twitter provided the following hottest of takes. From Simon Mahan, stuff's bad, but we can fix it if we want to. And added Terry Trimwell at 2T volts, badly enough. For more, the link to the report and coverage by The Guardian are included in the show notes.
Thanks, Abigail. So I think this is an interesting report. And one thing that I would just comment on is the fact that what we're seeing, say, in Germany right now, which has certainly been trying to increase its renewables. But what can also happen is that I think we have to balance this with the cost to the end user. And I think when you see the cost to the end users, like we're seeing in Europe, accelerate so much, you start to see some political pressure. And there can be some short-term fixes. So for example, Germany was expecting to eliminate coal by like 2030, and now they're looking at potentially extending that because they're really in a tough situation. And in hindsight, when they were after the Japanese nuclear disaster, they started eliminating nuclear power. And in hindsight, that's put them more and more dependent on Russian gas. And as I've already talked about, that they import about 40% of their gas needs from Russia. And so with this geopolitical flux they're in now, there's going to have to be maybe some short-term fixes, because again, consumers will be only willing to bear so much in terms of end cost. And so that's just something I think that when the policymakers are looking at this, making sure there's flexibility and more, flexibility with our options moving forward as they go through decarbonization, because decarbonization is going to increase volatility in the markets. It's been shown to do that whenever you're going to go through a transition. It's going to increase volatility, and you need to make sure that the prices aren't going up too much. That will impact consumers, that will ultimately put political pressure on the politicians who want to get elected at the next election.
Yeah, we talked about this in the last episode a little bit too, around transmission. So some of the FERC rulings recently have taken into account this concern about the cost of transmission and the ROE on transmission investments, and pushing back from a consumer's perspective to make sure you don't end up with the setback in your progress towards transmission expansion because you're passing on too much cost to your consumers. So your point, Robert, kind of echoes back to that. If you want to be effective in decarbonization, you have to make sure you don't get the blowback from cost pressures passed on to consumers, because then you get political pressure to do something different. So you have to make sure you're managing the transition in cost-effective ways. It's interesting that theme kind of repeats, and it's a very valid concern.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to look at stuff in hindsight, but again, there was certainly, again, just use an example of Germany. In hindsight, they look back and they'll say we were too dependent on Russia, even after Russia had invaded Crimea in 2014, right, and the Donbass region in 2014. So, there was some warning signs there, certainly that Putin was not a good geopolitical player. He had been shown to use energy as a geopolitical weapon in the past, and they kind of pushed themselves into a corner by their decision with nuclear power in response to the Japanese nuclear disaster, and their push for renewables, and they have seen great cost increases there. So, having more flexibility, I think in hindsight, they say have more options and more flexibility would be a key theme that would help decarbonization go a little more smoother.
It seems like the impulse is to kind of throw everything at the wall right now, see if anything sticks. But CCUS was brought up. That's being explored in the West here as well. There are states heavily dependent on a coal economy, and they are really looking to try to extend use of those plants and that foothold, the economic foothold of the mines in their jurisdictions and things like that as well, which could provide flexibility, but again, at what cost? Not just environmentally, but this is not an inexpensive technology and doesn't seem to be coming down in price as quickly as a lot of renewable options have been. Moreover, if you outfit a power plant with carbon capture, you are going to be generating less electricity, not more, because there's a parasitic load to the equipment. So it's interesting, very interesting how we're going to navigate this. It's going to be delicately, and I think with a lot of reactivity, it would appear.
Absolutely. I do. Part of the story that we kind of highlighted and is highlighted in a lot of the reporting out of the IPCC Working Group 3 report is around this carbon capture, and actually came across hashtag energy Twitter this morning, Stripe's announcement of the $925 million advanced market commitment fund for carbon removal. So these carbon removal technologies to take it out of the atmosphere and then convert it into rocks. To try to transition and accelerate and innovate in the carbon removal space. So in order to innovate, right, you got to have some funds, you got to have some seed money. And this is one of those market tools that people are trying to, initiate development of that removal technology. But one of the things I wanted to kind of go ahead.
Just to imagine that the direct air capture is going to require something to run. Maybe a lot of, I don't know, energy.
Yes, take a lot of electricity.
It doesn't, you can't just go like, oh, hey, that'd be nice, and set it up in your yard and it soaks it up naturally and it does a great job. I think it's there are going to be some big fans and a lot of pulling going on. I don't know, but
yeah, that's at least the direction we're going right now. Is your big fans pulling carbon from the atmosphere and turning them into rocks. It's going to take a lot of electricity, and for electric utility enthusiasts, I got some more load. Not going to fight back against that. Oh no, I have to produce more electricity and sell more electricity. One of the things around flexibility and making sure that you're doing like least cost techniques for integrating renewables had me thinking a little bit about SRP. Do you have a coming up story, Abigail?
I do have a coming up story. In fact, I just learned, and I haven't gotten down to the details of it, but the Arizona Corporation Commission today did deny Salt River Project the opportunity to expand in a natural gas peaking plant. They were going to expand by, I guess it would be about 133%. They have a 12 unit peaker plant that they wanted to add an additional 16 peaking units to. And it's been controversial. SRP is a public power entity, which doesn't normally have to go through the Arizona Corporation Commission to make its decisions, but because this is a power plant and there's a power plant and line siting committee that is under the umbrella of the ACC, and they gave the go ahead, but the commission itself had to weigh in, and it's been the subject of a couple of meetings, and just today they said no. So I'll be talking with the folks at Salt River Project and say, so what are you going to do? Because their position has been, well, we need this extra peaking capacity in order to add more renewables so that we can have flexibility. And it's just as you said, but other things that were controversial about it wasn't just the massive amount, but that it was slated to go in next door to a historically Black community, which has been putting up with a lot of pollution, et cetera, and disproportionate amounts for a good amount of time. So like I said, a lot of delicate footwork we have to take to make these things happen.
And you're gonna write something up and gonna be in California energy markets this week or next week?
Yeah, this week for sure. Yep.
So probably when you get this episode in your feed, you can go to California energy markets and click on that story and read more.
Right.
Drive some content, Abigail.
Yeah, let's do it.
Fawcett, did you have anything on this story before we move to the next one?
I didn't have a whole lot. I found the carbon capture stuff really interesting. I definitely like the idea of using carbon capture to remove existing carbon from the atmosphere, not so much to further the coal plants that are out there. I think that's a much better use of that technology. It's obviously read a lot of articles on it. Some people are optimistic, some are pessimistic. It costs a lot of money, uses a lot of energy. It'd be interesting to see how that moves forward.
Absolutely. I will. So Energy Twitter has a lot of thoughts on this and I love thoughts. I'm going to do a hot take. I think the business model for direct air capture may be less problematic. The carbon capture and sequestration that happens at the power plant is more efficient, but it also has this issue of continuing the project's life. Like, I can just keep doing this. Whereas the carbon removal, direct carbon removal is like maybe a better business model because you're investing in your own infrastructure. It's not furthering life with some other infrastructure. There's something there that is a hot take that maybe we'll get edited out. That's what we do at Public Power Underground. Some things I say get edited out, and you never know the more controversial thing I said that you never heard.
Well, I would like to say one more thing, plugging a little more news data, is that there's an article in Clearing Up from last week about carbon capture, potential for carbon capture at a couple of Wyoming coal plants. And an opponent in Wyoming was quoted in that article as saying the most surefire way to close a coal plant is to force it to have carbon capture technology. It makes it a lot more expensive, less reliable, and generates less electricity using more water. So her take is that the writing's on the wall. That's Shannon Anderson of the Powder River Basin Resource Council. So that's a perspective as well.
And another reason to go read news data.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. How many more reasons do you need?
We're just going to give all of them. Just wait for it. Okay, we good? Let's do it, Robert.
All right.
Okay, Paul, we're ready for the typewriter. Brian's got the next story.
All right. The UK government has bought the electricity system operator ESO Oversight Division from National Grid for an undisclosed amount. The division of National Grid responsible for keeping the lights on in Great Britain will be returned to public control by 2024 under government plans for the effective nationalization. A new public body, the Future System Operator, will have responsibility for planning and managing energy distribution, with a focus on the challenges posed by decarbonization. The effective nationalization of the ESO division comes just 3 years after it was formally separated from the rest of National Grid, albeit within the same corporate group. Rob Davies of The Guardian is the author of the piece.
So I'm going to age myself a little bit and just give you a bit of history on this. So when I was growing up in Ireland in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of England, of Britain. And it was after the late 70s where you had the winter of discontent. Everybody was on strike in Britain pretty much. The garbage wasn't being picked up. It was, complete, not good times. So she came to power, I think, in 1979. And there was a lot of nationalized industries in Britain, and she went about, and her government went about privatizing many of these. And the electricity sector would have been one of these areas. And so it's interesting that the Conservative Party, which was the party of Margaret Thatcher under Boris Johnson now, has gone about nationalizing, this part of National Grid. And I think, again, it kind of talks a little bit about what we were talking about last time. I was watching Sky News, which is one of the British news channels. And a lot of the coverage has been about increasing heating bills in England and Great Britain. And there's a lot of political pressure on Boris Johnson and his government about these increasing prices. And again, growing up in Ireland, it can be quite wet, and it's quite wet in England. It can be quite cold, and especially coming, for the winter heating season, people are going to see their bills going up substantially. And again, that puts political pressure. And I think ministers here want some more control on this. As we go towards decarbonization, the UK has had the biggest reduction in carbon of all the rich countries. I think since something like 2000 or 1999, they've seen a 44% drop in carbon emissions. But that's really, a lot of it's the transition away from coal in the UK. But there's other areas that they really need to focus on, especially the transport area, and that's what we focus on. So as they go through these commitments to get to a more decarbonized future, the ministers want some control, again, balancing with what we were talking about before, with the impact on end use consumers. And of course, the war with the Russian invasion of Ukraine has just thrown a complete curveball in the whole that, and just exacerbated that situation that was already happening. And so that's really what I think the trend is here. They want more control.
I was curious. So we talked about this on the follow-up to Arin reports too, but a lot of this, the UK story has been evolving since last fall around this energy crisis and the consumer price crisis, where they're passing a lot of costs on to these end use consumers. And one of the stories is all of the energy suppliers that have defaulted and gone bankrupt over the past basically year. So one story says 31 energy companies have ceased trading because of the wholesale gas prices. The biggest one, which I think we talked about last November, was Bulb, which has 1.7 million customers, which is in special administration. Don't know what that term means. How much do you think this transition and nationalization is related to that consumer pressure? Because we talked about that too, right? You have this a lot of political pressure by customers during this high price period. How much do you think that is? Is that the real driver here? Is they're experiencing these really high pressures, and Boris Johnson thinks he has the political mandate to go do something dramatic like this? This is pretty dramatic, isn't it?
Yeah, so I'd say it's not unprecedented. So what I think I've seen as well in the UK is they have gone, the rail system was privatized, and they've kind of renationalized some of the rail system as well. And again, due to consumers not being happy with the status quo and where it's at. And again, I think that these are bread and butter topics. You think about, if I'm doing my commute to work on the train, and the service is terrible and the prices are crazy, that's, and you're voting on that, right? You're voting on my energy costs have gone up, and I'm voting on that. I'm not happy. I don't feel good. So I think that's certainly a big driver. And of course, again, people are making, countries around the world are making commitments to decarbonization commitments. We are on the path to that. And I think they want to make sure they have more control. I think that's a big part of this.
Yeah. Any thoughts here, Brian or Abigail?
Not really. I am remembering a video I saw about a guy whose job it is to manage the grid in England after a certain popular television program shuts down on like Sunday evenings, and everybody turns on their kettle to make tea and talk it over. And I'm thinking, well, that's going to be a government problem now. So we'll see how that plays out, because I think it really is that. No, most folks aren't the nerdy folks driving in and going, well, but it's the price of gas and it's because of Putin and blah, blah, blah. They're going, darn it, the lights went out when I tried to heat up my kettle.
Yeah.
Down with the government, down with nationalization, bring back Thatcher. I don't know. It's yeah.
It's funny, growing up in Ireland, if there's ever a problem, if anything ever happens to you that's bad, the whole solution is I'll put the kettle on and have a cup of tea. Like that's the solution. And I'll tell you something else that's kind of humorous. So I always remember when they had the California energy crisis, it was back in the 90s, they were putting some price caps on the markets. And I'll always remember in Ireland, I think there was a big outcry about the price of Guinness, and that publicans were charging too much for Guinness. So they actually instituted a price cap on Guinness. So we always have our priorities, right?
Is the price cap still in place?
No, I don't think so. I just remember
traded as a commodity.
there was a lot of outcry about publicans were charging too much.
Wow.
That's awesome. Okay, let's put a kettle on. I need a typewriter, and then we're going next. You ready, Robert? I'm just going for it. I don't know what I was supposed to do there. Our next news story comes from an article published March 30th by Ethan Howland at Utility Dive. Constellation NewEnergy agreed to pay $4.7 million for allegedly violating California independent system operator market rules that are designed to ensure the grid operator has enough power, according to an agreement the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission approved Tuesday, March 29th. According to FERC, the company had a practice of offering imported RA into the day-ahead market at $399 per megawatt hour from unspecified sources. If the offer cleared, Constellation NewEnergy planned to rely on the spot market to buy the electricity. The company would reoffer the imported capacity in the real-time market at either $899 per megawatt hour or $999 per megawatt hour. In June and August of 2017, Constellation NewEnergy was unable to secure electricity in the spot market and failed to meet CAISO's dispatch orders, FERC said, noting the company stopped that business practice. FERC's enforcement officer said it was unreasonable for Constellation NewEnergy to expect it would be able to wait to secure electricity in the spot market to support its RA imports when the market was constrained. Constellation NewEnergy is a unit of Constellation Energy, which separated from Exelon last month. They agreed to pay a $2.4 million fine to the U.S. Treasury and $2.3 million to CAISO. The company agreed to the facts described by FERC's enforcement office, but neither admitted nor denied the alleged market violations. We're going to link to the article in the show notes from Utility Dive, and maybe California Energy Markets did y'all cover this?
No, I didn't find any coverage in our archives, but I think the big news here is that well, to me, I'm just wondering what took them so long. I mean, this is a 2017 violation. So what I can say is that the market's doing a little better at getting ahead of that sort of thing now. I know in New Mexico, they've had to extend operations at a coal plant this year because PNM, Public Service Company in New Mexico, the operator of that plant had planned to get out of it June 30th, but supply chain constraints put a delay on the renewables that were supposed to replace it. And one of their big worries was like, oh no, we can't play fair with CAISO if we are gambling on resource adequacy. You know, you can't make it up with market sources. So we're getting a little ahead of that now, and which is good, I suppose. But I think it's interesting that it, you know, you think it takes a while for FERC to do things. It takes a while for them to bring the money in too, when somebody screwed it up. So
process, you know, there's some due process. They probably started it.
Certainly. Oh, due process. I'm all for due
Process.
process, but you wonder why transmission takes so long to get up. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, interesting. Like the focus on capacity has definitely turned dramatically, probably since the blackouts in the summer of 2020. It was 2020, right? The
2020, yeah. As if we needed anything else in 2020. We got blackouts too.
Oof, no doubt. And it is interesting, the scope of these fines, and I wonder if some of it was just sending the signal at the right time on the fines, right? Hey, these are fines, it's real, and we're going to enforce these, and a lot of these are as much a market signal as they are you know,
indeed
actually,
yeah, definitely. As we've said before, you know, uncertainty is the theme of pretty much everything these days. So people would rather it not be that way when it comes to flipping on the light switch or turning on the kettle or their AC in the summer. So and to find it is just not good enough.
yeah, that's just not good enough.
Yeah, like I'd agree in terms of you got to be able to point to capacity source. So you know, that you can't just go into the market and hope for the best. That's not what the market's supposed to do.
Right.
It seemed pretty blatant to me. I'm not an expert in this area, but it was just kind of interesting that it like blatantly did it and didn't seem to care a whole lot until they got caught. I don't know if that's a proper take or not, but
there's definitely some matter of fact reporting in there, because it looks like FERC laid out their case very eloquently, and they were not contested.
Yeah, it was like, so you got me.
Cost of doing business.
Yeah, one hopes not, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Are we ready for the next one?
Okay, Paul, we're ready for the typewriter, and Abigail's got the next story.
Yeah. So I wrote this one. Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak on March 29th signed a memorandum of understanding committing Nevada to work with 18 other signatories to electrify truck and bus transportation by 2050 in their states. The signatories commit to a goal of 100% of new medium and heavy duty vehicle sales in their jurisdictions being zero emission by 2050. An interim target of 30% zero emission sales for such vehicles by 2030 is also included in the MOU. The initiative was launched in 2020 by Northeast States for Coordinated Air Use Management, a nonprofit association of air quality agencies founded in 1967 to address air pollution from New England power plants. California, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and Hawaii also have signed the initiative. So yeah, it's not just in the power plants.
So I can start. I found this to be really interesting. I think that kind of proud of being part of the West Coast that's signed on to this. I do think 2050 is probably a good target, because electrifying heavy duty vehicles is not going to be easy. We're going to need some huge advances in battery technology to do so. I couldn't find the actual MOU. I found it interesting that they talked a little bit more about just zero emissions, and I wasn't sure if this included other technologies like green hydrogen, that sort of thing, that are maybe a little more viable earlier potentially than batteries for heavy duty vehicles. So still more to come on that, but I found it to be interesting, and I'm just curious to see how the market moves on this. and how quickly?
Yeah, like one thing is certainly we've seen in the commodity markets is that lithium, the price of lithium and many other materials that go into batteries have just been going up like with everything else. So, I think certainly when you talk about the batteries, there's going to be they're going to look at a lot of different chemistries that go into the batteries, and they'll have to continue to do that, especially for these, as you say, the larger vehicles that may require different chemistries.
Yeah, something a little bit lighter, potentially, but more dense from an energy standpoint. Because I think that the big talking point around heavy duty vehicles is you have to add so much batteries, you start taking away from the ability to haul a large amount of weight, because you're already hauling a lot of weight in the battery.
Right, which is one thing that makes hydrogen look a little more attractive, because it doesn't weigh much. That's part of the benefit. But yeah, there was an interesting article, I can't remember if it was yesterday or today, actually, strangely enough, in the New York Times about whether trucking companies, the companies who make trucks, actually, not the companies, not the ones who drive them, but which direction they're going to go on that. It's kind of a VHS or Betamax question, to date myself there. But what's going to emerge as the dominant technology? Because do we have the hydrogen infrastructure? Well, they all take energy. Hydrogen
Right.
is a little bit of a demanding thing to produce. So you can plug it into the grid and draw and charge your battery, or you can get the hydrogen, which is going to have to come from generating electricity as well, if we're talking about decarbonizing. So interesting.
Those are not small electrical loads.
Not at all.
Get into a whole lot, but it definitely is going to take some new infrastructure if we're going to have a whole bunch of green hydrogen plants.
Yeah. And there is the issue of the battery chemistry too, and what it could be, where it will come from, if it's going to spontaneously combust or not. What's our tolerance for such things? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work left to be done on medium and heavy duty transportation. It's a big segment, big energy use that needs to be decarbonized. There's a lot of room for innovation, Robert, in this space. As electric utility enthusiast, I'll champion the electric use because I like retail sales of electricity. I'll plug the episode we had, a bonus episode last week with Northwest Naturals, Chris Craker. And we talked a little bit about this efficiency of conversion to H2, because you lose some of the energy during this conversion process, and it's a trade-off, right? Of like, okay, my battery is a more efficient storage mechanism to store electricity and use it in an electric motor, which is more efficient, but hydrogen is lighter. So there's massive trade-offs that somebody's going to be paid well to innovate around. It's a good space for innovation, isn't it, Robert?
Absolutely, it is. Yep.
We're hoping to have more sales regardless, one way or the other, right, Paul?
One way or the other.
Yeah.
I'll convert. Yeah, I'll do some electrolysis in Class K Beauty service territory. Anybody interested in anyway?
That's it. Let's hit the typewriter and move on.
All right, Bonneville's public power customers have taken an important step in laying the foundation of the preference contract that will replace the regional dialogue contracts after they expire in 2028. Both the Public Power Council and PNGC Power issued white papers on the contract structure. PPC's 30-page paper reaffirms Public Power's preference rights to the Federal Columbia River power system, acknowledges BPA statutory obligations, and supports the continued use of a tiered rate structure. The paper also calls for final contracts to have durability with adaptable products, services, and terms that will allow BPA customers to meet their needs as they evolve over time. When reached for comment on the contract negotiation, Public Power Underground special correspondent Matthew Shretnick stated, in 1983, Robert Greening, then head of the Public Power Council, began a law review article with the line, "Being a preference customer is not what it used to be." While I don't know if I agree with Mr. Greening, as the Northwest continues to engage with BPA's provider of choice initiative to shape the next iteration of BPA's power supply contracts, a review of just what preference means is likely beneficial. Continued Matt, Public preference is the requirement that BPA prioritize public bodies and cooperatives in the sale of power. In the Northwest, municipally owned utilities, public utility districts, PUDs, and electric cooperatives have priority when it comes to purchasing energy marketed by the Bonneville Power Administration, hence the term preference customers. End of selected quote. Not the end of the quote from Matt, who has more to say about preference if you ever want to talk about it with him. And maybe we'll get him back here to talk about it further at some point. Links to the article in Clearing Up covering the publication of PPC's white paper and both PPC and PNGC's white papers will be included in the show notes.
This was a great article in Clearing Up. What a good coverage by Steve Ernst. A lot of work went into the white papers, both by PPC and PNGC. I have lots of thoughts on products and services needed within the Northwest to, like optimize the value of this federal Columbia River hydro system and orient it appropriately for public power and the durability we need in the next contract. But that's probably for another time that we can get into a little bit deeper. I'll just say I appreciate Matt's comments around preference, and I decided to include a lot of quotes from him because he's smart. And yeah, anything you have, Robert, on the next contract? TEA's got some customers in the Northwest.
Yes, we do, and we're working with them closely.
Good. Abigail, this is a very Northwest public power topic, very Northwest.
Indeed.
One of the things we talk about is how important it is to be durable in the face of maybe market expansion to other regions. That's important for the entire West.
That is.
Sure, these products could make sense.
That's a place where
market.
Yeah, and where markets are definitely innovating.
Yes, they are. Yes, they
Looking
are.
around, figuring out who to buddy up with and how.
And how.
Yeah,
we're running out of time, so we'll cut this one short. Thanks to Matt for the quote. And if anybody wants to talk to him, you know where to find him. He's a special correspondent. He's got a Matthew Shrednick special on the store. Back to the store. We have merch, including a Matthew Shrednick special t-shirt. You good? I think we're good.
Okay. That's it. Let's hit the typewriter and move on. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll close out the episode with a quick rundown of news stories we didn't get to in our TLDR segment. We're calling Energy West Lite.
So Northwest Public Power Association believes in public power. For 82 years, NWPPA has supported public power utilities and other associates in the greater Pacific Northwest by offering education, training, communications, governmental relations, and services like RFP and job postings. In addition to public power, what else is important to NWPPA? Local control, member needs, integrity, and quality products and services. Today, NWPPA proudly serves 155 member utilities and more than 325 utility industry associate members. Learn more or register for a class at nwppa.org. That is nwppa.org. Believe in public power.
Well done, Brian.
Next up, we're TLDRing our way through the news in a segment we're calling Energy West Lite.
This is Energy West Lite, a segment where we TLDR our way through the news. I'm Paul Dockery.
I'm Abigail Sawyer.
And we're lightening up Energy West. The promo also for Energy West News Data's weekly podcast.
Right.
That maybe we should convince Abigail to maybe do some. Maybe you should get on that one, Jason.
I recorded it this morning. I'll have it.
Yes.
So, big podcast week for me.
Big podcast week for Abigail. Okay,
yeah,
you're up first.
All righty then. In fish news, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory has developed a new fish tag it describes as a Fitbit for fish, but which actually does more. While both can track locations and heartbeat, the lab on a fish will also track information about the surrounding environment and biological data, including tail movement and calories burned. Environmental data collected include water temperature, pressure, and magnetic field. Reporting on the story by Casey Mahaffey in Clearing Up.
Casey also recorded. I mean, she can be on the podcast too, but she also covered our next story. The Snake River Basin and other parts of Oregon and southern Idaho will likely see major water supply deficits this summer, according to the Northwest River Forecast Center's April 7th official water supply forecast. Even considering an early April storm. The volume of water flowing to Lower Granite Dam from April through September is now forecast at just 75% of the 30-year normal, a drop of 4 percentage points in the past month. This means that without significant rain or snow, the Columbia River's largest tributary will contribute far less to the basin's water supply this year.
And Dan Catchpole reports that Seattle-based Trident Winds wants to develop a 2,000 megawatt floating offshore wind farm off the Washington coast and isn't waiting for the federal government to auction leases for developmental rights on the outer continental shelf west of Grays Harbor. The company submitted an unsolicited lease request to the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to pursue Olympic Wind, Trident's name for its proposed development. BOEM will first make sure Trident Winds is eligible to get a lease. After that, the agency must see if any other developer is interested in the area. If there's interest, BOEM would then hold a competitive lease process according to its website.
We need to convince Dan that he needs like a thumbnail photo on there too. We need some offshore wind pictures and clearing up. Who's in charge of that, Abigail? We need some pics.
Good question. Yeah. Make sure.
Question.
Take a memo, Dan.
Okay. Memo, Dan. He won't. Do you think he listens? I don't even know if he listens. I bet he listens. I don't know. Rick Adair has coverage of Moody's and Moody Investor Services affirmation of BPA's AA2 rating. Moody also revised its outlook up from stable to positive. The affirmation of the rating considers the agency's strong positioned and expansive network of hydro and transmission assets, access to competitive power, long-term power supply contracts with customers through 2028, and credit supportive attributes as a line agency of the government. I really messed up that reading. Next time I'll practice more.
The top story out of California energy markets comes from editor Jason Fordney. Wholesale electricity prices rose significantly in the California Independent System Operator territory in the last quarter of 2021, compared with the same period in the previous year, as natural gas prices pushed them upward. CAISO's market monitor said, day-ahead energy prices were up 50% in the quarter year over year, CAISO's Department of Market Monitoring said, as gas prices rose by more than $2 per MMBTU at major trading hubs, Henry Hub, SoCal Citygate, PG&E Citygate, and El Paso Permian. Gas prices increased by 57% at SoCal Citygate and by 65% at PG&E Citygate in the quarter, pushing up marginal energy prices across the CAISO footprint.
Yeah, Jason also has a really nice thumbnail picture of a substation, which I think are beautiful, with double rainbow. I mean, this is a beautiful picture. I don't know what it relates to in prices, but there it is. And factoid, we're just going to insert this in there. I learned just this past weekend that the second rainbow is inverted. Did people know that? I didn't know that. The first one is the normal, but it refracts a second time. I actually told my mother was visiting for spring break. This is all background information. They'll probably end up getting cut. But she told me this. I was like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all. And then it was verified. And so now I told my mom I'm sorry and that I love her. The top story in California energy markets on April 8th was from how do you pronounce that, Abigail?
Jim DePeso. And this is actually the top story in the Potomac section. So the
top story in the Potomac section.
Yeah, he's our federal Potomac correspondent there. So
there we go. The Supreme Court on April 6th reinstated a Trump administration rule that narrows states' Clean Water Act certification authority over energy and other infrastructure projects. The court's action left the door open for Biden administration's plan to rewrite the 2020 rule.
Oh, also from Jim DePeso in the April 1st edition, not one of the April Fool's articles, President Joe Biden on March 31st invoked the Defense Production Act to spur expanded domestic mining and processing of critical minerals needed to produce batteries for electric vehicles and energy storage. Biden ordered the Department of Defense to support domestic extraction and processing of lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and manganese.
Think about your take on this for at the end, Robert, because we're going to come back to it. You talked about this issue earlier, so we're going to come back to you. Okay, quick TLDR out of the Billings Gazette. Thanks to Energy New Digest for helping us find it. Bloomberg is reporting that Colstrip power plant operator and co-owner Talon Energy is seeking loans for a potential bankruptcy. On an earnings call late August, Talon told investors it was $4 billion in debt. Tom Ludy covered the news for the Billings Gazette.
And coming back to Casey Mahaffey, 2 groups representing public power in the Northwest and nationwide have sent letters to the Northwest congressional delegation and the Biden administration asking for faster action and more transparency in Columbia River treaty negotiations. Both letters point to what they're calling a $150 million annual overpayment to Canada in the form of carbon-free hydropower that is paid by Northwest Electric ratepayers. So I don't know what you have to say about that, guys.
And we started with KC, we're closing with KC, and the April Fool's edition, not the April Fool's edition, but the April 1st edition, not an April Fool's joke. A White House blog signed by top officials of 5 federal agencies indicates a shift in perspective on future management of the Columbia River salmon and steelhead, and on the long-standing issue over the 4 lower Snake River dams. Although the blog post does not lay out any specific actions, it acknowledges tribal fishing rights and the impact of federal dams and promises change. Quote, "We cannot continue business as usual, doing the right thing for salmon." I'm reading yours, aren't I? And Abigail.
Thanks to Public Power Underground's production partners at News Data for letting us use their leads, and thanks to Ian for compiling them. Now back to the crew for closeout of the episode.
Well done. That's ready. Paul and Abigail, and
That's Energy
West Lite.
Lite.
That was a longer than usual. That was almost the Energy West like intense version.
Yeah, it seemed, heavy light.
Yeah, heavy light.
So
I told you get ready, Robert. I told you ready.
I'm ready. And again, I go on tangents, so I'll be fine if you edit this out. But one of the things I'd like to dive deeper into is just the article about the inflation. Right, we're seeing a 50% increase in California or CAISO wholesale prices. And if you just think about everything, everything's going up. The price of gasoline's up, rents are up. The price of food is up. I was just talking like, Ukraine is known as the bread basket of Europe. And Russia also exports a lot of stuff. So we're seeing everything pretty much go up. And with the Federal Reserve behind the curve in terms of inflation, I think inflation report came out today. I think it was like 8.5% was the inflation report. They're behind the curve. They're going to have to raise interest rates aggressively. So a great part of the U.S. economy is consumer spending, and I don't see how the consumer is not going to be squeezed, and the consumer spending is not going to be squeezed. And I think from an economic perspective, as a country, we need to be concerned about the potential increased chances of recession moving forward. So again, all these, with the policy of the Federal Reserve being behind the curve, with the inflation that we've been seeing, and it's been continuing. I think that certainly has increased the chances of recession in the US over the next year or two, would just be my perspective on that. That was just on that. And then I just comment on the critical minerals. It is going to be becoming increasingly important, especially when you see Russia using mining and resources as a geopolitical weapon. China has a lot of rare earths, and a lot of times you're going to these other places that are maybe not stable to try and mine a lot of these things that we're going to need for our future production of renewables and other things, other technologies. It's going to be very important that more and more, production comes from, countries that are aligned with America, or even better if it's coming from America itself, just from a geopolitical perspective. And I think this invasion of Ukraine has put that in very, very great detail and focus as of right now. And I think that trend will continue. And you're already seeing that with, US doing agreements with Europe to supply a lot of LNG in the future. And Germany's, building two new LNG plants to take more LNG as they try and diversify, their energy source away from Russia. And I think that trend's going to continue and accelerate moving forward.
Yeah. So I was curious on your take. One of the things I think I'd heard was that it really isn't that we have less of these rare earths. It's just we haven't developed the infrastructure to access them and then both extract and then convert them from mining to actual usable materials. And I was actually curious, Abigail, I think you covered a geothermal plant in the Southwest that was actually getting lithium as a byproduct of its extraction of some geothermal plant. Do you remember this article from Brian? Do you remember this article? This was one that you remember that?
Yeah.
I do remember
Are you
that.
guys hearing the motorcycles cruising by
I know,
my
I
office?
love it.
Sorry.
Great sound effect, actually.
So giving space to edit that if necessary. But I know, let's see. I have covered some stuff about, pulling lithium out of, maybe it's, there's some interesting stuff. The Salton Sea is definitely a place where you can get a lot of lithium. And I think that might've been my former colleague, David Krause, who's no longer with News Data. We miss him. He went on to write about particle physics somewhere. So, anyway, everybody has their thing. But he wrote a lot about lithium extraction from the Salton Sea brines. And there's a geothermal activity over there. There's geothermal activity all over the Southwest. So we wonder why we're not making more of it right now, making more of that potential, that innovation, because it's beneath our feet. You've got to strike it just right. But, once you do, you've got baseload, it's carbon free.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, as you do that geothermal extraction and drilling, you get access to some of these rare earths. Was I think the take on one of these articles that we did cover is in some of the steam that comes up and that process.
Right. I'm remembering. I think I read this, but like you can pull them out as they go through, because the geothermal typically, you pull it out, you run it through your turbines, and you put it right back in. So it's a pretty small footprint. All in all, it's just really the footprint of the power plant and construction and everything. It's not a huge amount of mining for geothermal itself, but get what you can out of it while you're there.
So Robert, how much of this do you think is infrastructure? And like, we need the infrastructure to extract these and then convert it. Less it's the geographic location of where these are located.
Yeah, I think why America has been so successful with extracting shale gas is because you had everything coming together. You had the expertise, you had the capital, and you had the infrastructure. And so some other countries, other people say, well, why aren't other countries doing all the shale? Like, there is shale elsewhere. And it's because, it's the infrastructure and you need all that. So you have to build up, you have to have a focus on it. And that this is, certainly the market signals are being sent for a lot of the prices of these, commodities. There is an incentive to build the infrastructure, because the market prices are so attractive right now. And I think, as well as that, the governments will be more encouraging of this, because they understand that from a geopolitical perspective, they want to be in control of their destiny, and they don't want to be relying on other countries that could be poor geopolitical actors.
Were you coming in with something, Abigail? I saw you come off mute.
I think Robert's spot on. I wonder about, there's always the issue of the political will in this country, and the environmental issues, the permitting, things like that are, those are reasons we've taken a lot of the more damaging, if you will, sorts of technology elsewhere, where the environmental laws are less of an issue and things can happen. So as we've been developing those metals in China or Mexico or places like that, we're going to have to figure out how important it is to do that within our borders, I think, and what the sacrifices we're willing to make in that regard are. So it's definitely heating up in a lot of the untapped regions, in the Southwest, where there's a lot of land, a lot of potential for solar and winds, and a lot of mineral. Nevada is a place that's really got a tremendous amount of mineral wealth.
I've actually heard that some of the technologies we developed as part of that shale revolution are what's going to help enable geothermal to be successful. That drilling technology.
makes sense.
Has been an innovation that'll be translatable to the clean energy transition. What do you think of that, Robert? That was a good segue.
Yeah, that's really good. And like that's really what you do. A lot of times it's not, maybe it's applying something that's been done in one industry to another industry, or one area to another area. And that can be a great innovation at work.
Yep. Brian, you got anything, any articles you wanted to cover?
No, I would echo Abigail's thoughts on that, though. I think there's some real pros and cons to domestic production of, say, lithium, right? And there's some environmental concerns for sure, but I would say that we probably are going to do it in a much more environmentally friendly way here than we are pushing it off elsewhere in other countries that maybe don't have as strong of environmental laws and that sort of thing. And I think from a overall perspective, it's much better to do that locally with better laws, or with more stringent regulations. So I see why we've gotten to the point of, or where we're at now, but I think bringing it back domestically is probably a win-win overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a time of some very, I think all this conversation we've had today, it's a time of some very interesting conversations and a lot of balancing acts going on. And events will, like the war in Ukraine, events like that will bring the balance a little, shift the balance a little bit where it was before. And I think we've already seen this trend away from some of the globalization we've seen in the past. And I think that trend will probably accelerate and continue. Okay, that's all the news we're covering this week. The next regularly scheduled episode will be recorded April 25th and published April 28th. To make sure you don't miss it, or bonus episodes in the meantime, you can sign up for an unintrusive newsletter with links to all the ways to consume this fascinating content at publicpowerunderground.substack.com. Otherwise, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast app.
Okay, so the Public Power Underground Substack, if you were signed up there, you got the email notification about the merch with links to how to purchase it. So go there, sign up. They were the first, they were like the fourth or fifth. To be honest, like I texted people. I told my friends, hey, check this out for me. Matt Shretnick was the test subject. They got to order the first one to see if it actually worked. But they were it was the first broadcasting of the site. So publicpowerunderground.substack.com and gets a link to all the merch. Robert, you did a wonderful job. Do you feel valued and appreciated?
I do. I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you all today. And I'm glad that you could understand me okay.
No, I'm so honored that you accepted the invitation. Like we got connected and I was a little nervous, like, oh, is he really going to say yes? And you did. You came through. That's awesome. I appreciate it. Abigail, your first time.
Yeah.
Do you want to get in the rotation? I'll put you in.
Sure.
We'll do a 3-person rotation from yes.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. You did great. I really appreciate you. Do you feel appreciated?
And indeed I do. Yeah.
Okay. You feel heard.
I do. And that's a rare thing, when you go off on energy topics, a lot of folks kind of zone out. So it's always nice to be heard.
Not our audience. Our audience wants the nerdy topics. That's what they're here for. Brian, that's right? Do you like what we're doing? You feel good?
Love it. Always nice to be back for sure.
Okay. You feel the value, you feel the appreciation coming through. You want me to come give you a hug? You're right there.
Yes. After this.
You're not going to hug on camera. Come on.
No, we aren't going to.
I dare you.
That's a subscriber only content. I might have to cut
that. As always, send any news, questions, opinions, corrections, or complaints to Paul on Twitter at @APOWmanager, or if you're a friend of the Underground, you can send any of us a note. You don't have to be subscribed to News Data's weekly newsletters to get this podcast, but it sure makes the podcast make a lot more sense. That's all for this week. Thanks for tuning in.
Public Power Underground is a production of Clatsican IPUD and News Data. The views expressed here are our own and not the official views of Clatsican IPUD, News Data, or the organization of the guests also appearing on Public Power Underground. That means TEA is not on the hook for all your comments, Robert. It's just all on you. Public Power Underground is public power and public power adjacent news from a power department's perspective. It's written and directed by Clatsican IPUD's power department, led by me, Paul Dockery, and it's edited and published by the stellar team at Pioneer Utility Resources, led by associate producer Sarah Wooden. Our theme song, Roll On Enthusiast, was rewritten, performed, and recorded by Arin and Ian Bledsoe. And special thanks to our celebrity guest host, Robert Trinnear, for participating in this week's episode. Public Power Underground for electric utility enthusiasts. Public Power Underground, it's work to watch.